Hey guys, what's going on? It's Sport the Aussie here, your favourite NRL fantasy coach, aka the NRL Fantasy Fanatic, coming at you live from his very own apartment. Because guess what guys, it is round number 12, 12, and it's the first major bye round with only 8 teams playing. As you can see, we've got the South Sydney, Parramatta, Warriors, Brisbane Broncos, Cronulla Sharks, Canterbury Bulldogs, the Canberra Raiders, the Sydney Roosters, and then we're following that game with our first State of Origin game for this year. It's going to be an absolute ripper. I'm actually excited to see the New South Wales Blues team this year. It's going to be a great game, and I think this is the first round where we're going to make up some big spots. Currently ranked 5,180th, because we didn't have that great of a round. We got 20th, 1,000th overall for round number 11, and we slipped back a couple here. We had a couple of hiccups, like for example, Nathan Brown getting injured, his ribs got injured, and therefore went off after like 3 or 4 minutes, scoring a dismal 6. We just had so many hiccups throughout our lineup, but this is the first round where we're going to be able to take advantage of a really big loophole that's known as the vice captain / captain's loophole. But before we get into it, if you're liking the series thus far, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Be sure to give this video a subscription as well on my YouTube channel, because every time you subscribe, it's actually supporting me and my channel. And we're just about halfway through the season. We're just below the halfway mark at round 12. After the following round 13, we'll be halfway through. And you should really start to kind of get into your team and see how you can dial it down, because at the moment, this is a big week for us. And I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks. By planning, getting ahead of everyone else, and making sure you have enough players to play this week in order to fill in the spots so you can capitalize on people who do not buy plan, because buy planning is the biggest thing. But before we get into it, let's talk about the biggest theme of this video: vice captain / captain's loophole. The vice captain's loophole is very simple. It's very straightforward. Basically, you get 2 chances at doubling a score of 2 players that you get to pick, ultimately giving you 2 chances. I think I just repeated that on loop. But to make more sense of it, let's actually have a look at the theoretical works of this and what I mean. For example, if Angus Crichton, and yes I will say Angus Crichton, this is my vice captain's pick for this week. If Angus Crichton does get 77 in the first game, being that the Rabbitohs and Parramatta Eels are going to play, his score will double if the captain gets subbed off onto the bench, and his score will still count, provided that we have less than 17 players, as he becomes an auto emergency. Let's walk this through a little bit more and see how this strategy plays out. So at the moment, South Sydney are playing the Parramatta Eels. So I have a choice here where I can elect to have a vice captain of a game that's occurring there. So I'm going to pick Angus Crichton because he's been absolutely amazing. Look at his game log so far. He got 78, 58, 84, and then I decided to captain him. He got 29, and then as soon as I took the captaincy off him, he got 71 and 77. Now I'm expecting him to play 80 minutes because all of a sudden Madge seems to love him, and it looks to be our go-to boy that he's going to be playing 80 minutes from now on going forward. So I want to make sure I captain him. But in case he doesn't get the minutes that he might not get, like we saw a couple of rounds back against the Seagulls, and therefore not get a great score, I want to have a backup plan. I want to have someone else hold that captaincy in case that happens. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the other teams that are playing that week: Warriors, Brisbane, Cronulla, Canterbury Raiders, Canterbury Bulldogs, Canterbury Raiders, and Sydney Roosters. Now for me, I've actually decided to elect Valentine Holmes, and it's very rare that I ever elect to captain anyone in the backs. Now, the decision I purely made to elect Valentine Holmes is because, for the simple fact is that the Canterbury Bulldogs are going to be undermanned. They're going to have a couple of players playing in the Origin team, and I expect them not to be that fast at the back end of the second half, so I'm expecting Valentine Holmes to absolutely explode. And that's what you might find, is that a couple of these main contenders might do much better against other teams that are depleted because they don't have Origin players playing. So that's something else for you to consider. And there's actually proof to show that in the past, that when players play teams without their star players, they might get more points. Like Paul Gallen might get more tackle bust because he's up against a depleted, Canterbury Bulldogs side that might not be able to make the tackles on him. That, for example, Josh Jackson might be able to on that flank. That's a short way of looking at it. But anyway, getting back to the captain's loophole. So what happens is, the first game's played. South Sydney play Parramatta, and Crichton gets 70. And I'm really satisfied with the fact that he gets 70. So I therefore want to double Crichton's score. I'm going to be saying Crichton and Crichton because back and forth, because people keep going back and forth with me how to pronounce it. So what do I do with Valentine Holmes? Now, if you have a captain, you automatically don't get double the points for your vice captain. We know that. But what happens is, once your captain or vice captain gets benched, they're therefore not actually your captain or in your rotation. So what would happen here is, Crichton would get 77. I would then decide, well, Valentine Holmes, I'm really happy with the fact Crichton's going to get that score. I'm going to sub him off for Jarryd Hayne. The question that always gets prompted, on your screen, is when either your captain or vice captain is placed on the bench, this player will not score double the points. You will not be able to nominate an other captain or vice captain. Please think twice before interchanging this player off the ground. So I click yes. And what happens here is that Valentine Holmes' score does not become doubled. In fact, Crichton's score will actually get doubled. And therefore, I'll have Crichton's score doubled as if he was a captain. Now, what happens to Valentine Holmes in this scenario? Valentine Holmes' score still counts towards my total because he becomes an auto emergency. Remember is that when you have 16 players that have played, and if, for example, your 17th player, like let's say BJ Leilua, in a normal week decided not to play, you would then get your lowest scoring bench player. Now, if you only have 17 players playing, that would mean Valentine Holmes' score would therefore be your lowest scoring non-playing reserve, and that 47 points that he scored that week would still actually count. So that's why it only works during periods of time of origin and bye coverage, is because you've only got 17 or less players playing. Now, if I did have 18 players playing, let's say it was Ben Hampton as well as Valentine Holmes. Let's say Ben Hampton was actually playing for South Sydney and I've already elected 4 reserves to play. I would get the lowest score of those 2 players. So the benefit here for me is that I'm taking full advantage of the fact that the captain loophole works best when you only have 17 players or less. And that's going to be the majority of teams out there. Let's face it, in a major bye round, I highly doubt that you have 25 to 17 players playing across these 8 teams. It's not possible. It's probable. I mean, it's not improbable. I mean, it's not probable. What I mean to say is it's very unlikely that you've got a full team full of Bulldogs players, because you wouldn't be scoring in the top half of the guys, because at the end of the day, all the great fantasy scorers aren't in just one team. It's always good to split your eggs a little bit, but that's another discussion for another time. So one thing that you have to make sure is when you do this is that you do definitely only have 17 players or less, and that you have chosen your 4 reserves. For example, I've chosen Burns, Nikorima, Elliot, and Tyrell. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. Fuimaono. There we go. We just tried it anyway. And that it's not unpicked, because if you don't have it picked, then it goes into like a weird error and it doesn't actually work, and you don't want that to happen. The other question I'll probably get is, why can't we do this every week? Well, it's an easy one to identify, is because you'll have other players playing. You'll have your other 25 players playing, and there's a strategy that a lot of people will do after the major bye rounds, is that they'll only have 17 to 18 players playing anyway, and therefore they'll do the captain's loophole every week. But that comes really risky in the simple fact that you could have any of your 17 players pull out, and therefore you'd be scoring with 1 less person anyway. So it's a risk when you don't have all players, or at least 20 players playing on your bench after the major bye rounds. But that's pretty much how it works. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. So let's say, for example, Crichton only scores 20, then I would simply leave Valentine Holmes there in that position and as captain, and therefore get double the points that Valentine Holmes would score. So the big thing for me here is that I've got 2 shots at it. I've got 2 shots at getting a well-scoring captain, and therefore I'm taking a bit more of a risk. A safety conservative version would be here is that I'd elect to go Paul Gallen, and then therefore, you know, we're expecting him to score 60, so if Crichton doesn't get it, he won't get it big. But if Crichton scores small, I'm actually going to go Valentine Holmes. It's very important before the kickoff on, what's the day? What is the day that this is happening? Before the kickoff on Friday, 7:50, is that you actually do this. Because if you don't do it in time, remember, you can't change captains once they're locked in. You can't do it. It's not possible. The other thing that you might accidentally do, let's say if Jared Hayne was actually playing for South Sydney and he'd had played on the Friday, that would lock those two players out, and therefore you couldn't sub them on. So I couldn't sub Valentine Holmes off the field and therefore not get Angus Crichton to score. Now, I can't really see many people having a full bench of one particular position. I mean, it might happen if you've got hookers. Like, for example, if you have a case of Pritchard and Jaden Brayley. Perfect example. You've got Brayley in at that position and Kaser in that one, or vice versa, and one locks out the other and you can't trade him out, and therefore the captain's loophole will not successfully work. Luckily for me, all the guys who are playing State of Origin, or particularly for their club, aren't going to get locked out. Now, Josh McGuire will get locked out, not because he's a State of Origin player, but he'll get locked out once the Brisbane Broncos play on Saturday. The players who have bye rounds, for example, Paul Vaughan, will get locked out on the Sunday once kickoff occurs for the Canberra Raiders and Sydney Roosters. So it's important that you kind of watch that and kind of see how your players score. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's how it works. One of the questions was, can you show us what the NRL Fantasy Bye Planner does? Now, I think in round 4, I did a good 10 minutes of what the actual NRL Fantasy Coach, what you purchase for $20 for a year, actually gives you. And it's one of the buy detectors. So if I click here, it's telling me that on round 12, I've got 8 players on a buy. I've got 13 players on a buy. 15, 16, 18, 19, for those rounds respectively, how many players do I have out? That's handy. Now, you can do that on an Excel spreadsheet as well. A lot of people do it that way if you want to save yourself $20. I purely pitch my $20 because I'm trying to support the NRL Fantasy app. That's it. That's why I do it. It makes my job a little bit easier when I'm looking at the buy detector. But if you're more keen to see what you can see that other coaches can't see when you have the NRL Fantasy Coach, go back to round number 4 on this video track, and it illustrates you every component that you get that you wouldn't otherwise get by being an NRL Fantasy Coach buyee, if that makes sense. I hope that does. But for my team, I want to talk about a few things that are a little bit upsetting to me, and that's going to be the changes that have happened. So Nathan Brown, he's been named at number 13, but as we know from the last round, he hobbled off the field. He looked like he was in agony while he was, grasping at his ribs. I wouldn't be surprised if last minute he gets the flick. I mean, the guy couldn't breathe without being in pain. Now, it's very unlikely that it's just bruised ribs, but we don't know. No one really knows. Another question that I got recently was, what am I doing with Corey Norman? Now, I already traded him last week because if he's going to be out for round 17, as per the Eels website statement, there's no point having a buy player for coverage, a coverage buy player who's not going to be playing, alright? So the trades I've made this week are trying to give myself in a position where I'm still buy planning. And that was RadRadRa. I brought him in for Ponga. I decided to trade Ponga out. I thought, look, Ponga might not play again for the rest of the year. He might come back for 1 or 2 games. That really depends upon Coote's injury. That's it. That's how it's playing down to. So I thought, I'm gonna downsell to RadRadRa, who is actually a really good winger. Like, he's really great, but he's had a bad run. And hopefully, after all of the controversy that he's had in his life at the moment with the court case, that's beyond him. Well, behind him, not beyond him, behind him, and therefore he can just focus on his football. So I'm expecting him to play well. Remember, Parramatta Eels are the best team to have when it comes to buys. Round 16 and 19 are the only games that they don't play. So 3 major buy rounds is what they play. Braidon Burns was a disappointment because, again, it doesn't look like he's going to be named in 17. So I'm really only going to be running about 14, 15 men. Kodi Nikorima is another one. I've got absolutely no idea. He's been named in the 18th man for Brisbane Broncos after being one of their stars last week and the week before, scoring 2 tries, 1 in each game. I thought with Andrew McCullough's injury, I thought, okay, what's going to happen here is if Milford's named, Kodi will go to 9 and he'll play hooker. Wasn't the case. He's been named on the bench. I don't know what to think about it because at the moment, Bennett's screwing a lot of us. It might just be Bennett playing games with NRL fantasy coaches and just trying to tick us off. I don't know what to say. I mean, he's a hold anyway. until the next round. His break-even's only 13, so even off the bench, he should be able to clear that quite easily, although we know in the past when he's only played 31 minutes, he only scored 8. But that's really going to be depending upon how much ball he gets. So I'm trying to cover my ass here. Paul Gallen is also another addition to my team. How did I bring him in? I brought him in for someone. I would have brought him in for someone. Who did I bring him? Corey CHN. CHN, I brought him in for CHN because I thought CHN doesn't play the major bye rounds, and we also don't know how likely he is to play. I think he's plateaued. I think CHN has actually plateaued. As for the rest of the team, the other trade, the third trade, because remember you got 3 trades a week for the bye round. Adam Reynolds is my boy. I wanted to bring him in earlier in the year for Bryce Cartwright. I delayed it because I was like, this guy could get caught up for Origin. Might screw me over. Very injury prone. I thought I'm going to have to bring him in. So I brought him in for Kane Elgey this week because Elgey's plateaued, man. You got to get rid of Elgey. He's hit his stride and he's kind of done his deed. The other trade that you might be looking to do is James Graham because, again, another good buy player coverage, and he's just bottomed out with 170k loss considering his last 3 results when he got HIA'd in round 9. Scoring 51 in round 10, which is quite good, and then around 11 not playing the minutes and therefore not getting the score. So he's got a break even of 71. I expect him to lose money. Seems like a lot of people want to bring him in, but if you're looking for someone cheap to play this round, he's another option for less than 450,000. Nathan Brown, I'd delay until we know what's going on there with his injury. I don't know. It could go either way. You know, anything could happen there. What else are we looking at here? This is my team at the moment. What other trades would I also consider for the following week? Well, I actually want to plan in Cameron Munster. I think Munster is undervalued at the moment, and I think he's hit his lowest peak that he's going to be all season. Break-even's only 47. Came back from a broken jaw. Can play half or winger, and I might bring him in for Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, but I'm a little bit unsure what I want to do with him next week. So that's my next week's planned trade, because again, Melbourne players only have 1 major bye round, which is this round, and then they've got another bye in round 19, so he'd be an amazing cover to have, but also an amazing player to have in your team he never gives up. He's just a great fantasy scorer all around. So, you know, I don't know what to say. Let's have a look at this in another way. Let's have a look at anyone else's team who's currently, I just want to put the R back on Burns. Let's have a look at the guys who are coming first and second to see how their buy planning is going to go in comparison to us. So at the moment, this is Kerry Cassidy. This is without trades this week. So if he trades, this is as many players as he has. He's got Damien Cook, 1. Graham, 2. Gallen, 3. Burgess, 4. Brown, 5. Crichton, 6. Frawley, 7. Johnson, 8. Kotrick, 9. Tyrell, 10. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, 11. So at most, this gentleman right here, the guy who's coming first, will have 14 players if he uses all of his trades this week in order to bring in fantasy, in order to bring by healthy players. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. Let's have a look at the guy coming second. Brayley, 1. Graham, 2. 3, we've got Semi Burgess, 4. Thompson, 5. Crichton, Whitehead, 6. Nikorima, 7. 8 for Johnson. 9 for Croker. 10 for RTS, Gutherson is 11, and Abbey is named 21, so I don't expect him to play. So again, he's another guy who's got 11 players at the moment. So this is why it's important, because I've got an extra 4 to 5 players as we speak. Now, 4 to 5 players can score anywhere from as low as 20 between the 4 or 5 of them. I highly doubt that, to possibly 200. So I reckon I can gain on this guy a little bit more this round. In fact, and gain on a lot of people. Like, let's have a look at the teams. Who's this? Zazu Knights. $9.6 million roster and almost 9.7. He's got Damien Cook, Whitehead, Brown, Crichton, Burgess 5, Nickel 6, Moses 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He's got 13 players. So again, he'll have to make some trades this week. And that's another question I got on the NRL Fantasy Fanatic website on my own forum, on my own thread, not my own forum. It's not my forum, please don't get it mixed up. It's my own thread. called the NRL Fantasy Fanatic, a new fantasy video every Wednesday with analytical breakdown. Question for this week's video: is it sustainable to have a H to H, an overall ranked strategy, or it needs to be one or the other? Now, if you're playing head-to-head, all head-to-head competitions, in my opinion, should also include the bye rounds. I've got no idea why people set them up without the bye rounds, because I think bye planning is an essential part of your strategy when picking your team in the first place. The reality is, no. Like, if you're trying to take this game seriously and you're like, well, I'm trying to pick my team based on, you know, if they're playing bye rounds or not, you're really going to be, costing yourself a significant amount of points in comparison to other people who won't be doing that, who'll be bye planning with the plan of playing as many plays as they can, or scoring as many points as they can in each and every week. And you'll notice your rank this week, if you bye plan properly, will propel higher than any other round throughout the season, purely because some people don't do bye planning at all. They do this head-to-head thing where they're like, we don't play around 12, 15, or 18, the 3 major bye rounds. But think about it like this. Now, if Semi was playing for New South Wales, he's not, then he would be out for round 12, 15, 16, 18, 19. As a result, that's going to bleed your team, because you're going to have less points than someone who's got more points by covering that spot. Even at the end of if at the end of the day, the next week he comes back and scores, 10 more points than the guy who he was playing up against. The reality is, trying to make up a gap of having a player not play versus a player playing isn't going to work. At the same token, if you're bye planning, you shouldn't just bring in players because they're going to, play during the 3 major bye rounds. Like, for example, let's look at the Parramatta Eels roster, and let's see if we can see anyone who I wouldn't bring in. So, for example, Kaufusi, he scores alright. Look at his scores, 25, 15, 11, 8. You shouldn't bring him in purely because he's going to score well while he's in the major bye period. So I'm still a little bit sick. So, for example, Shoni Mataudea scored 42. Now, Kaufusi in his last 2 games scored 25 and 15. 40 points. Shoni scored more points in 1 round than he did in the last 2. And that's the whole point of bye coverage. You need to have good players playing, or players who are reasonably going to score well, or cash cows, or high-tier players. You can never... oh my god. You can never ever skip out on doing proper bye planning, in my opinion. And in my other opinion is that you should have your head-to-head schedule to play the major bye rounds, so no one doesn't play with that motion in mind. Now, pace is best is Corey Norman. What did I do? I think I covered that recently. I ended up selling him. Now I've got Cody Walker and Reynolds in my side. Walker because, well, I can push him down to fullback if I need to bring in another half. And I plan on bringing Corey Norman back in once he does come back, hopefully earlier than later. So that's one thing to kind of ponder. But that's pretty much my trades. Let's have a look at this Blues team for a second. And let's talk about them, because this is one of my favorite points, is just talking general with you guys and getting your opinions back to me. James Tedesco, I think is a great pick. Blake Ferguson, yeah. Dugan, yeah. I love Jared Hayne. I mean, I'm a traditional Eels fanboy. I'm surprised he got in the team, but I'm also not surprised. I think James Roberts would have been a better spot to have in the team. And potentially Jack Bird. So I'm a little bit surprised with Hayne being there, considering he's not been in form. But Brett Morris is another one I'm a bit surprised about. But he's a known quality Origin player, and that's why they brought him in. Maloney and Pearce, I think that was a get-go from everyone. Woods, I think, has been underwhelming. I think there's so many better players than him at the moment. I think Vaughan is on form. And the disappointing thing is, Laurie Daly said, yeah, he's in form, but he doesn't have a pass to being on form. That's bullshit. I mean, you should just take this season in retrospect and see who's doing what at the time. Nathan Pete's 9. I love that hooker choice. Apparently it was going to be Peter Wallace until he got injured, which would have been I don't know what to say. I think it would have been ridiculous to have Wallace back in the team. Fafita, I think, was a given. Josh Jackson... I'd love to hear what you guys think more about Josh Jackson. I think he's good, but I don't think he's great. Boyd Corner as captain, I think that's another given. Tyson Frizzell, in my opinion, Tyson Frizzell's not even the best lock in the Dragons. I think Jack de Belin's much better, and I'm really disappointed that de Belin doesn't get the go. I think Frizzell's an amazing flanker. I think he should be playing 11. There you go. David Klemmer off the bench should be really good. It's kind of hard with David Klemmer because they're going to play him as a forward, yet he's been playing as a lock for the last couple of weeks and not making that many runs as he has been in the past. Wade Graham is also in the mix for that second front row rotation. Travojevic, I think, was a great pick. Jack Bird at 17, like I said, I'd actually prefer him to start. I love the fact that he's there, but I think Jack Bird at 4 and Peachy. Tyrone Peachy at 17 would have been absolutely amazing. I think Tyrone Peachy has been playing the house down, best utility in the game as we speak. Matt Moylan, 18th man. I mean, who cares about 18th, 19th, 20th? Because if you're not playing in the team, then history usually forgets about you anyway. That's not to take anything away from those guys, but I don't think Matty Moylan is a Blues player in comparison to the guys that have been picked. As well as Jordan McLean. Jack de Belin, I think, as I said, should already be there. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this team. Can we actually beat the Maroons next week? I don't know, it'd be huge. And where are you guys watching the game? Let me know in the comments section below. Is there a certain part in the western suburbs of Sydney that people are going to watch this game? And should we all do a meet and greet? I don't know, potentially. But thanks for checking this out, this video, guys. I hope that the Captain's Loophole is going to help you and serve you well this week as much as it's going to serve me, because trust me, it's not against the rules and everyone's going to be doing it. So be sure to get your head on straight and be checking your fantasy apps. So spot the Aussie video again, guys. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, and I'll check you guys out shortly. Shh.